I'm not hearing anyone. Mr. Bunkowski.
Do you hear me?
I'm sorry, who's that?
Ed McFalls.
Oh, hi, Mr. McFalls. Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I'm interested. I can't see my name on here, so I wasn't able to unmute myself.
I'll rename you.
Okay, thanks.
Later.
No questions.
Thank you, sir. So I'll turn to Mr. Bonkowski for the Quarry Swimming Association. Do you have any questions, Mr. Federico?
No questions at this time, Pat. Thanks.
Thank you. Preeti Pinto for Radley Run 3 HOA.
No questions.
Thank you, ma'am. William Hoffman or anyone for Arborview HOA.
I don't see anyone.
Okay, thank you, Mila. Anyone for Westtown Village? Cataletto's Seafood?
No.
All right, Robert Dahl, do you have any questions, sir?
You should be able to unmute yourself.
How about now?
We
We can hear you.
Okay, good. My question has to do with the traffic flow coming out of the proposed development during the morning rush hour between 7 and 9. Excuse me, between 7 and 9. At the conclusion of last month's meeting, Mr. Edelman and Mr. Federico briefly discussed the McMahon Associates traffic generation study. And if I remember correctly, Mr. Federico generally agreed that he was satisfied with the report's conclusion. And I just wanted to push back a little on that conclusion. So I make reference to the transportation impact study for the Robinson Tract. It was from August 2019. It was authored by Ms. Klein. Now, in that study, Ms. Klein stated that, and I'm basically quoting what she wrote, that based on data from the Institute of Traffic Engineers publication titled Trip Generation Manual, the proposed development would generate approximately 158 new trips during the weekday morning peak hour, and of that number, 151 would be going out and 47 coming in. And now, I obviously don't have the expertise to rebut this conclusion, but that number of 151 outgoing trips seems rather low to me when you consider that with 319 dwellings, there could be as many as 550 to 600 vehicles based in that development.
Pat, I'm going to object at this point. I'm looking for a question as opposed to...
Okay, yeah, I just have to tee up my question.
Right, I figured that. Go ahead, Mr. Bell.
Okay, yeah, I'll be done in 30 seconds. It just seems to me with 319 dwellings, there could be as many as 600 vehicles based in that development. And with 151 leaving in the peak hour, that would mean approximately 400 would still be parked in their driveways between 7 and 9 o'clock. And that just seems low to me. So for Mr. Federico, do you concur with Ms. Klein's conclusions in her study? And or do you think there is some merit to my analysis that there could be maybe 200 or 300 additional cars leaving between 7 and 9 and trying to mix with a highly congested area between 926 between South New Street and 202?
I'm going to agree that Ms. Klein completed her trip generation estimate in accordance with the Institute of Transportation Engineers practice. I would also just clarify to your question, that's 151 vehicles coming out during a 1 hour period, not over the 2 hours from 7 to 9. So it's 151 estimated for that 1 hour.
Okay, I was under the assumption it was 7 to 9. So there would be close to 300 coming out between 7 and 9.
If it's consistent over the 2 hours, yes, that's what it would be.
Okay, well that makes a little little more sense. I was under the impression it was a 2-hour time period. But okay, well that's that answers my question.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mamakari, do you have any questions?
Not here.
Philip or Susan Jones, do you have any questions?
Not here.
Hello,
Oh,
Who's that?
this is Mr. Jones.
Yes, sir. Do you have any questions?
No, we have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for letting me know that you were on. Deanna Lararis, do you have any questions?
not here.
Edwin or Lagita Boyer?
Here. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, we have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. David or Catherine Prize?
No, because my name's coming up.
Folks, we have some people talking, and I don't know who you are that we can hear. I don't know if David and Catherine Prize are on.
I don't see them.
Just a reminder that to please keep yourselves on mute until you're recognized. Jennifer Kramer?
Here.
No questions at this time.
Thank you, ma'am. Denny or Patty McFadden?
Not here.
Carol Weller?
Here.
I have no questions.
Thank you, ma'am. William Worth?
Yes, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
It's my understanding that Westtown Township has yet to pass an open space referendum. And I'm wondering if one of you there could speak to that point.
Well, Mr. Worth, I'm going to suggest that that's a more appropriate question for a Board of Supervisors hearing, because it doesn't really relate to Mr. Federico's testimony from the last hearing. Do you have any questions for Mr. Federico?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. Thank you, sir. About Bob Williman?
Not here.
Linda Miller?
Not here.
Ellen Steele?
Go ahead, you can unmute yourself. She's here. Can you try to unmute yourself?
Oh, no questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Victor or Carly Malatesta?
Not here.
David or Iris Berger?
Not here.
Karen Grime?
Not here.
Steve Ernie?
Not here.
Eve Herrick.
Here.
No questions at this time, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anthony Simkovich.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. First is, Mr. Federico, have you evaluated the revised traffic plan relative to the Westtown Planning Commission's comprehensive plan?
The comprehensive plan was considered in doing the review, yes.
Okay. And did it fit? How good a fit was it in your opinion?
From the traffic perspective, with the exception of the previously noted pedestrian elements, it was fairly consistent with my recollection of the comp plan, yes.
Second question I have is, with that being said, from a traffic mitigation perspective, where are we now in terms of the revised proposal? Would you say 80%, 90%? 20%?
I'm not. Can you please rephrase that? I mean, I think at this point there are certain things that the applicant has indicated that they will commit to. I'm not sure if they have committed. So if you could please be a little more specific, I'd appreciate it.
I was just thinking from a mitigation point of view, are you satisfied with the revised plan, or is there more work to be done?
On the mitigation of their impact, the improvements that they identified in the traffic study do mitigate the vehicular delay impacts. There's still more work to be done, in my opinion, on the accesses and site distance.
Okay, and final question
and 926 in New Street is still somewhat outstanding, but seems to be close to resolution.
Okay. And the final question I have is, will there be a need to cut down more trees on Pleasant Grove Road to widen the road?
I would expect that some of the construction would result in trees being removed and replaced with new trees, yes.
Would you, how much further would the road have to be widened?
It varies, but typically around 4 feet.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Simkovich.
Thank you.
Fenton Mejia.
Here.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you. Nicholas Bonkoski individually. Do you have any questions now, sir?
My response is still the same, but thank you for asking.
Sure.
No questions.
I'm required to ask, so thanks.
I know.
Dr. Cecilia Wright or Mr. William Fosberg?
I have a question for Mr. Simkovich.
No, Mr. Federico?
Yes, Mr. Federico, sorry.
That's okay.
After the long discussion on the roundabout, I hate to bring this up, but did he have a preference for the location of the roundabout placement? There was a lot of discussion about our ability to drive around a roundabout, although I'm sure most of us know how to do that. I was more interested in the location of the roundabout. And driving that road, it would seem logical to put it in a different spot than what was previously allotted.
At this point, I'm reviewing what was provided. I think if the development moves forward with a roundabout there would be some adjustments during the design process and based on coordination with the adjacent owners.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Richard Hurst or Suzanne Kruger?
Not here.
Thomas Martin or Renee Rockwood?
have one question based on the previous comment that West Pleasant Grove Road would be widened by an estimated 4 feet as a result of the proposed construction. Do we anticipate any change in the speed limit for West Pleasant Grove Road?
At this point, I am not anticipating any change in the speed limit along West Pleasant Grove Road.
Do you, with the widening of the road by the 4 feet due to the proposed construction, would you expect that the widening of the road by that 4 feet, would that tend to increase the average rate of speed regardless of change of speed limit?
At this point, I would expect it to have a negligible change in speed.
Okay. Knowing that there is usually excessive rates of speed currently, even with the narrow road, will there be traffic calming things put in place that would perhaps encourage traffic to at least stay within the current speed limit, even though the road is wider and might invite higher rates of speed?
Again, not sure I would agree with your characterizations about the higher rates of speed, but to the basic point of the question, it has been a recommendation to improve the safety of the proposed accesses and travel along the road to implement some sort of traffic calming on West Pleasant Grove Road. To date, the applicant has presented a concept with a couple speed humps, and again, I'm advocating for a roundabout at the Connector Road intersection with West Pleasant Grove Road.
Okay. As a matter of kind of traffic theory, if the road was wider, would that tend to make people feel more comfortable driving more quickly?
It may make people more comfortable, but it is most of the studies that people have been referencing in this conversation have been talking about taking wider roads and narrowing them. This is really, at this point, not anticipated to have a material impact on the speeds.
Okay. Yeah, my concern is because we live on West Pleasant Grove Road and the traffic is already well exceeding speed limit on a regular basis. To make it even easier to go through, I would imagine that it might have that effect. That's my thought. Thank you. No more questions,
sir. Thank you, sir. James or Susan Mutter?
We have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann or John Hellion?
In last meeting, Ms. Edelman introduced some Pennsylvania guidelines. Mr. Federico laughed and said, wow, they don't even use these anymore. Could you please explain why they don't use them anymore and what the flaw is that people see that, and the reason for not using them?
Yeah, it wasn't because of a flaw. At the same time that PennDOT was working on updating that publication 414, the Federal Highway Administration issued new guidance on roundabouts. I believe that was document 672. And PennDOT made a decision that instead of updating Hub 414, which would essentially be redundant of the FHWA document, they discontinued its use. And now all the design manuals generally reference the FHWA materials.
Then should that document be used in this determination?
I will defer to legal counsel on that.
All right. My second question is: there was some indication that there was no difference between a three-way intersection controlled by stop signs as opposed to a roundabout. Are you familiar with the U.S. Department of Transportation studies that said in a roundabout accidents are reduced by 70% and accidents involving injuries are reduced by over 90%?
I am familiar with the studies that show that a roundabout roundabouts typically do reduce accidents in an appreciable manner. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Helene. Ann Helene, I think you're on if you'd like to ask your questions.
Okay. Yes. A lot of time was spent on the roundabout issue the last time, and there seems to be a question, and I'm wondering if there's something in the way of safety numbers or in the county of Westchester that would seem to lead Mr. Edelman to think that Chester County citizens' ability to navigate them safely, exiting and entering them responsibly, was an issue.
I am not aware of any Chester County specific studies showing roundabout usage beyond or outside the normal bounds that we've seen across the state and nation.
Okay. Also, worldwide, they are used widely in cities such as New York, London, Paris, Tokyo, Seoul, etc. So I'm guessing, and I'm contributing this statement, that if it's good enough for cities like that with huge congestion issues and safety issues, it's good enough for Westchester, Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Myron or Sharon Grubal?
We have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. David Teal?
No questions at this time.
Patrick McDonough?
Not here.
How about the board? Does the board have any questions for Mr. Federico?
Scott, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions based on the testimony and the cross-examination so far.
Dick, do you have any questions?
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Al, all my questions are for clarification purposes. So if you can help me with clarifications, that'd be helpful. I'm going to begin with one question, which is that with all, and we heard it in some of the questions that were just been asked, there were many questions and a back and forth between yourself and Mr. Edelman regarding all the full range of traffic, if you will. For the board's purposes, from all the studies that you've looked at with the application, what if any assumptions have been made in your view by toll that the board should be taken into consideration as it relates to traffic?
That's what assumptions by toll. I think there was a certain level of assumption about diversions associated with the collector road, and certain assumptions in general about the arrival and departure of the vehicular traffic. I don't know, and maybe the lack of it would be another assumption, but I think there may have been some assumptions about pedestrian traffic or lack thereof on their part.
Another question is that on page, the transcript of 982, at one point, and Greg, if you don't mind, I'm going to read this just because it leads to the specific question. Finally, if we go to the exhibit 74E and now around station 152, towards the left of the page again, we have got a small sag. It is not as significant as the other ones that were noted, but if you go back to 47, this is immediately adjacent to the other 90-degree dogleg on the internal circulation. Again, undesirable. Can you define what you mean by when you use the expression undesirable?
Yes. So it is considered undesirable design practice to combine sharp horizontal and vertical curves together. We have standards for horizontal curvature so the cars don't fly off the road. We have standards for vertical curvature so people can see and for safety. You've got minimums and maximums, and you try not to put the two minimums together because then that has a compounding effect on the safety.
Next question is just because it came out of the blue, and it was from page 985. And you said here, to this point, I had been leaving it up to the designers to determine if I were in a position to choose smaller roundabouts, gateways, maybe elongated vertical calming measures, like Seminole County profile speed humps might be considered appropriate, or I would consider them appropriate. The reference to Seminole County, I'm assuming that's Florida, and can you context that for us?
Sure. So one of the discussion points about potentially traffic calming on the collector road is to how do you not make it so aggressive that you're actually discouraging traffic from using it. And one of the means to do that is to actually use elongated speed humps, and a Seminole profile is longer along the center line of the road. What that does is allows vehicles to travel over it at higher rates of speed before they start getting a discomfort that is usually associated with the speed hump.
A little later on, you make a recommendation that provides for a connection for the church, or from the church to the collector road. Can you explain that a little bit? Just elaborate.
Sure. So this is something that's been considered over various development scenarios from this property to provide an access from Westminster Presbyterian Church to the collector road to disperse their traffic over a greater network than just West Pleasant Grove Road. In this case, particularly because of where the intersection of the collector road comes into West Pleasant Grove Road and its proximity to the church's exit-only access, it seems like there's going to need to be some modifications to that access, and an alternate connection to the collector road will be appropriate.
There was much discussion and debate, if I can use that term, between yourself and Mr. Edelman regarding small roundabout versus what I'll call the larger roundabout. At the end of the day, after the discussion between and the questioning from Greg to yourself, what are your views today that might be different, if they are, than what you first, as you first described your views in last month?
I believe that my views are the same as in last month, that a full roundabout is the preferable, safer alternative, and that it is feasible based on the information presented to be implemented.
Does that mean, for the board to understand what you're saying, that the smaller roundabout is unsafe?
I would say it is not as safe. I think a full roundabout where vehicles have to circulate around it is a safer alternative than a mini roundabout where vehicles can cross over it.
On page 998, you were asked the question by Greg, and do you agree that the applicant has met their burden to prove that the peak traffic generated by the development will be accommodated in a safe and efficient manner? I'm assuming that's from Greg. And you wrote back, or your answer was not based on the submitted conditional use plan. Still feel that way?
Yes, sir.
I think that's it, and I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Question one, first, hello, Al. What is your understanding, irrespectful of the connector road for the Orvis Way from West Pleasant Grove Road to Skiles?
Can you be a little more specific?
What is your understanding of the main purpose of West Orvis Way at this time?
At this time, will
For
provide
those of us on the west side.
It'll provide an alternate route for people on the west side of town to go north and south without using 202.
Question two. You were mentioning on page 989 how getting a trail connection to the Arborview property would be sort of difficult, I guess. I'm using my own terms there. Are you aware that there is a trail alongside Orvis Way that is the trail and path up to Stetson and Starkweather at this point from West Pleasant Grove Road?
Yes, I am aware of that trail.
And so in terms of a connectivity, the lack of difficulty, do you believe, would be less because the township owns that piece of property, or that trail? So connectivity, in your mind, what do you feel about that connectivity to the new property development, if it so goes that direction, up to that particular trail, not necessarily the trail that goes into their site on their own homeowner's property?
I think the more connectivity is better. I think the ability to connect to the trail along Orvis Way will depend in part on how that intersection connection is designed. If I recall correctly, the toll property, Crebilly property, may not have may not extend far enough to allow that connection to be made without going beyond their frontage.
Into what?
If I refer to
The church property, are you referring to?
Exhibit 47, they would have to go onto the church property and cross West Pleasant Grove Road. Or cross West Pleasant Grove Road and go along the Arborview property.
Question number 3 is on page 997, and you're talking about a right turn lane, westbound right turn at 926 and New Street, South New Street, that means. And you would suggest this, and my question is, to make that turn and that improvement, so to speak, would that entail taking any of Spackman's property?
A westbound right turn lane at 920 on 926 at New Street, as it's been presented by the applicant, would be completely within the toll property. The left turn lanes have the potential impacts.
Yep. Page 1002. Greg has a question to you regarding doing additional work on West Pleasant Grove Road again. And he says, isn't it true, though, that if additional grading is required or additional work is required, it would be done on the applicant's property or within the public right-of-ways, or right-of-way, excuse me. And your answer was, it has been stated as such. And did you mean the right-of-way of the applicant's property and not those on the north side of right-of-way in your answer? Because he did not speak to which right-of-way we were talking about on West Pleasant Grove Road. But I believe your answer, I want to know, was in reference to the Crebilly property right-of-way.
My interpretation of his question was that he meant the full right-of-way and could have included work on the north side of the road. Can you, one moment, please? Sorry.
That's all right. So I'm going to repeat this then. In terms of additional grading required, in doing additional work on West Pleasant Grove Road, grading, fill, cut, could be accomplished within the applicant's property without doing additional work on West Pleasant Grove Road. And then he asks you, isn't it true, though, that if additional grading is required or additional work is required, it would be done on the applicant's property or within the public right-of-way? And the public right-of-way includes both sides of the road. So you're saying, you're agreeing that would be the case.
I'm saying that
taking is on both sides would